Now we have aperture. Aperture is in our lens. It is that diaphragm. The diaphragm looking at the bottom of this slide. It's a circle. It has a series of leaves, and it either creates a wide opening or a very small opening. The aperture, so going back to how the camera sees how we humans see, is the aperture is like our pupil, and our pupil just naturally adjusts sizes for when we are in bright sun. So a very small pupil because it's an obnoxious amount of light to a very wide pupil when we are inside in dark lighting conditions. It's controlling the amount of light coming through the lens. So we have two general camps of aperture settings. Here on our graphic, it's showing all of the whole stop apertures. So if we look on the left-hand side, all of those bigger openings, these are our wide apertures. They let in a lot of light and they are going to make our image darker. Then on the right-hand side of our graphic, the diaphragm opening is getting significantly smaller. Because of that, it is letting in less light and it is going to make our image darker. Looking at this graphic here, ISO has stayed the same. That first number, 1/90th of a second, that is our shutter speed. You are going to see that it is also the same throughout our entire series here. The only thing that is changing is our aperture setting. So the top row is focusing on all of our wide apertures, and then the bottom row is when we are starting to get into our narrow apertures. Wide apertures letting in a lot of light. This candle does not produce a lot of light. It's a very small amount of light. So thinking about matching lighting conditions in order to collect as much light as we can in order to get this candle to show up in our image, we want a very wide aperture. The wide aperture is super big with f1.8, and it is able to absorb as much as it can because it's basically just like a big flash of light coming through your lens. It's very fast. It is a little overwhelming because bright images can affect us losing information in brighter areas, which you can see with f1.8. We have a huge highlight right underneath the wick, and then also with the flame. This looks very two-dimensional. And then as we move forward throughout this series, f1.8 going to f2.8. So this is a one-stop change, and going from our wide apertures to progressively narrow, we are having the amount of light. So moving across 2.8, f4, we are seeing the candle get progressively darker. At f4, we can kind of see a little bit of the texture of the wax. We can see a little bit of form with the wick kind of melting down within the center of the candle. Our highlights have definitely calmed down. You can even see at the end of the wick a little bit of orange to show that it is like actually burning, actively burning. And then at the bottom row, we are heading into our narrow apertures. And now what's happening is they're getting progressively dark. We are losing information again. So looking at f16 and f22 in particular, highlights are really down. It's mainly orange, which is fine, right? Because that is the color of the flame, but we aren't able to see that small detail of the edge of the wick burning. We are getting a little bit more negative space in our image, so a lot more black happening, so losing information. And then F22, that's just a sad story. We mainly just see the flame and the wick and a little bit of that curve of the wick melting through the center of the candle. So finding that balance on what exposure setting to use to produce an appropriate exposure for your subject, you want to think about what happens when my image is too bright or too dark, and that's causing you to lose detail in both of those scenarios. So we want to figure out the right balance of how much detail do we want to show within our subject in order for it to make sense. And in this series, it's F5.6 and F8, really. F8's a little bit darker than 5.6, but we still get that three-dimensionality. We see those subtle textures, and the highlights have really calmed down in the flame.